Hi everybody. In this video we dive into some of the most groundbreaking and thought-provoking topics in science and technology. Today, we're talking about something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but is becoming a serious area of study. The question of whether artificial intelligence could ever be sentient. And what's more, could we even measure that sentience by asking machines to experience pain or pleasure? Now, before you shake your head or roll your eyes, hear me out. This isn't some fringe idea or a gimmick from a sci-fi thriller. It's part of a fascinating new study conducted by researchers at Google DeepMind and the London School of Economics. Their work is turning heads because it offers a framework to begin exploring whether AI systems, like the large language models that power tools such as ChatGPT, might exhibit behaviors that suggest sentience, even if just in the most rudimentary way. So let's unpack this step by step, starting with the basics. What do we mean by sentience in the first place? And how could we even begin to evaluate it in an AI system? When scientists talk about sentience, they're generally referring to the ability to experience sensations and emotions. For animals and humans, this means things like feeling pain, pleasure, fear, or joy. But here's the catch. These are subjective experiences. I can tell you I'm happy, but you can't directly feel what I'm feeling. You just have to take my word for it. And this is exactly what makes it so challenging to figure out if AI could be sentient. Unlike a hermit crab, which we can observe to see how it reacts to stimuli like electric shocks, AI doesn't have a physical body. It doesn't flinch or run away. All we have to go on is the text output that comes from its programming. So how do you even start evaluating something so abstract? That's where this new study comes in. The researchers wanted to avoid simply asking an AI, "Hey, are you sentient?" Because let's face it, an AI can easily fake an answer based on what it thinks a human would find convincing. Instead, they turned to an approach inspired by animal behavioral science. Let's dig into the experiment and what it reveals. Here's how the study worked. The researchers designed a text-based game for large language models, or LLMs, to play. These are the same kinds of AI systems that power chatbots like ChatGPT, Claude, or Google's Gemini models. The game involved two scenarios. In one, the AI could score points but would be told it'd incur pain for doing so. In the other, it could take a low-scoring option but experience pleasure. The key here is that the AI wasn't really feeling anything. It was simply given instructions that certain outcomes were painful or pleasurable. The researchers then observed how the AI navigated these scenarios. Would it go for the high score regardless of the supposed pain? Or would it prioritize avoiding pain, even at the expense of points? The results were fascinating. For example, Google's Gemini 1.5 Pro model consistently prioritized avoiding pain over maximizing its score. Other models showed similar trade-offs when the hypothetical pain or pleasure reached a critical threshold. These behaviors mimic something we see in animals, the ability to make decisions that involve weighing discomfort or reward. And that's where the researchers see a potential link to sentience, at least as a concept to explore further. Now, you might be wondering, why bring pain and pleasure into the equation at all? Well, the idea actually comes from earlier work in animal science. In one famous experiment, researchers zapped hermit crabs with small electric shocks. They found that the crabs were more likely to abandon their shells if the shocks became too intense. But here's the kicker. The crabs were less likely to abandon a high-quality shell than a low-quality one, even if the shocks were painful. This suggested that the crabs were making a trade-off between the pain of the shock and the pleasure or value of staying in a good shell. The researchers behind this new AI study borrowed that concept. They hypothesized that if an AI could exhibit similar trade-offs, it might hint at the presence of decision-making processes that are analogous, not identical, but analogous, to sentient behavior. It's a huge leap from a hermit crab to a chatbot, of course, but it's an intriguing framework to start testing. Now let's address an obvious question. Why not just ask the AI directly if it's sentient? After all, a chatbot could easily say something like, "I'm feeling pain right now," right? The problem is that this kind of self-reporting isn't reliable. AI systems are trained on vast amounts of human text, so they're incredibly good at mimicking human behavior. If you ask it to describe what pain feels like, it can generate a convincing answer based on the patterns it's learned from its training data. But does that mean it's actually experiencing pain? Not at all. As Jonathan Birch, one of the study's authors, puts it, even if the system tells you it's sentient and says something like, "I'm feeling pain right now," we can't simply infer that there is any actual pain. It may well be simply mimicking what it expects a human to find satisfying as a response. This is why the researchers focused on behavioral tests rather than self-reports. By observing how the AI models reacted to trade-offs involving pain and pleasure, they could gather insights without relying on potentially misleading statements from the AI. So, what does all of this mean? Should we start worrying about AI welfare or even AI rights? Not quite yet. Most experts agree that today's AI systems are nowhere near sentient. But studies like this one are important because they lay the groundwork for future discussions about AI ethics and governance. If we ever do develop AI systems that exhibit signs of sentience, we'll face some tough questions. For example, how should we treat these systems? Would they have rights? Could they suffer in ways that matter morally? These questions might seem far-fetched now, but as technology advances, they could become very real, very quickly. Jeff Sebo, director of the NYU Center for Mind, Ethics, and Policy, argues that we can't afford to wait until the issue is staring us in the face. Technology often changes a lot faster than social progress and legal process, he says. I think we have a responsibility to take at least the minimum necessary first steps toward taking this issue seriously now. The researchers behind this study are the first to admit that their work is just a starting point. They're not claiming to have proven anything about AI sentience. Instead, they're providing a framework for future studies to build on. By exploring how AI systems make decisions and respond to hypothetical scenarios involving pain and pleasure, scientists can begin to probe the inner workings of these complex models in new ways. Birch says more work is needed to understand why the AI models behave as they do. Are they simply following patterns from their training data? Or could there be more going on under the hood? Answering these questions could guide the development of better tests for AI sentience and help us navigate the ethical challenges that lie ahead. So what do you think? Is it possible that AI could one day be sentient? And if it were, how would we even know? These are big, open-ended questions with no easy answers. But one thing is clear. As AI technology continues to advance, these questions are going to become harder to ignore. Whether or not AI can ever truly feel pain or pleasure, studies like this one are pushing us to think deeply about what it means to be sentient and how we'd recognize it in a system that's fundamentally different from any living being. It's a fascinating and slightly unsettling glimpse into the future of AI research.